Well, welcome to the Move the Stairs episode of podcast 72. We are recording on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, and we're happy you're here joining us today.
Yeah, we're so excited to be joined by Cara Wietstock. She has been in the biz, as they say, for more than a decade, writing about cannabis in media. Most recently, she was a culture editor, an entrepreneur, and the host of the Fresh Cut podcast. While she's got great experience interviewing top cannabis industry leaders, she's also worked at a premier dispensaries and even ran dispatch for a medical cannabis delivery firm in California. So we're going to have quite a conversation, Mitch.
Absolutely. We're going to ask Cara about how important she thinks it is to build customer loyalty by essentially educating your customers with the latest information and how to discern what is factual and what may be more of just opinion or maybe some marketing claims swirling out there.
We're excited to tap into Cara's expertise as a journalist, especially since focus is so important in building a business. You know, what journalists and outlets should CBD, hemp, and medical marijuana businesses reach out to and actually take time out of their business day to establish relationships with?
Yeah, build that rapport. And lastly, we're going to dive deep into how CBD, hemp, medical marijuana businesses can maintain that resiliency with some, pretty uncertain future out there. So we're excited to tap into Cara's expertise and perspective as a journalist, and then learn what she thinks business owners should prepare for as we turn the calendar to 2023, with so much right now up in the air.
All right, well, let's get started. We'll bring Cara into the studio. Hi, Cara. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think we did an okay job in introing you, but we'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're up to and tell us more about your background and who you are.
Well, right now I'm looking for my next step in journalism, but background-wise, I studied philosophy in college, so I'm just as surprised as you to be here as a journalist. Cannabis medicine really helped me in my life, and so I set out trying to share that experience with other people. And the way I knew how to do that was through writing. So I just kept writing about this plant, what it did for me, and slowly found my way into reporting on some of the coolest, newest technology and businesses in the biz.
Very good. Well, big background you have there. All right. we know that one of the biggest challenges when we talk to CBD companies out there is building that customer loyalty, really at a time when there are so many companies and so many products out there to choose from. There's a lot for the consumer to choose from.
Absolutely. And we believe that educating customers is a great way to build that trust and actually turn them into repeat customers, which we know is a pain point for a lot of CBD companies out there. So what do you think about the whole education bit? You kind of previewed it in introing yourself, but we'd love to hear more about that. And you also have to tell us your cat's
name. She deserves an intro as well.
There you go. Your assistant.
The question was educating customers on your product. It's essentially the most important thing, especially in CBD, with so many products that seem exactly the same. Oil after oil after oil, bomb after bomb after bomb. If you're telling a story about how you got here, about what goes into making each product, or simply the day-to-day at your business, that'll set you apart, build a relationship with your consumer, and keep them coming back.
Yeah, just kind of tell your story. We read at least a dozen articles a day, all with seemingly new information in this arena. So as a journalist, when you're doing research for a story, how do you discern what's right or wrong? What's fact? What's hyperbole out there?
This is a loaded question in cannabis industry, and I believe we're speaking specifically on CBD because we come from a line of very little studies, very little concrete fact, and that's for a variety of reasons. But what I do personally is reach out to as many first sources as I can. I have been working in cannabis for long enough that I have a pretty deep network of experts, scientists and whatnot that I can shoot an email to. And that's what I personally do. I know if you study journalism, there's some very serious bullet points that you go through to do this. In cannabis, we are blessed with the opportunity to be some of the first people writing about certain things, but that also comes with a great responsibility. And for a few years now, I don't know that everyone is taking that responsibility seriously because there's been some circular reporting we run with stories that haven't been fact checked. So that's a super important question, Mitch. And I think right now, since there aren't a lot of first sources, primary sources, the best thing to do is talk to each other, speak to experts, and fact check just the crap out of what you're writing if you want it to really make an impact and stand the test of time.
Okay. It's a great point that you bring up, because I mean, you hit the nail on the head. We're still learning so much about how this plant impacts us, how it impacts our pets, what it can be used for, what the different cannabinoids are best for. So where do you start? I mean, when you hear something new, and we're going to talk about the latest article you published a little bit later on in the recording, but as something, if it's a press release or a new study kind of hits your inbox and you're looking at it, where are you looking when you're trying to do that fact check? Do you have 2 or 3 different media outlets that you go to that you trust that may be writing about similar topics? Or is there like a higher education institution that you go to their website for facts? I mean, how do you do it as a journalist? It sounds really difficult.
It is quite difficult. You're absolutely right. I like to go directly to like PhDs that I've worked with, because there's a lot of curious doctors and scientists that entered cannabis with a lot of knowledge from outside. Ideally, I would love to go to a university. I would love to go and find studies that support or discredit something that I'm reading. But due to the lack of ability for federal funding for studies, those are just very hard to come by. So I think going to a network of people, or a lot of people don't know this, you can just email doctors and researchers on these studies just directly. Oftentimes, the email is just a click away right in the same exact page. And that is something I do quite often. And I just search for networks of people that are experts in extraction with CO2 or butane, or maybe somebody who's used the actual technology. Like nanotechnology is something that is kind of hard to comprehend, and there's a lot of opacity within that. And so search for someone like a doctor who has studied that and then moved into the space. I do a lot of detective work. I don't know if I'm making it harder on myself, but it's what works for me.
Well, that's reporting. I mean, you're putting your reporting skills to use, so that's exciting to see. Yeah, you don't know unless you ask.
Yep.
As Jordan mentioned, at M&C Communications, we're all former journalists, and so that experience that we have, it helps prepare our clients to take advantage of all the media opportunities that may arise, that may come their way, by positioning those clients as thought leaders, experts who can give great interviews. And so we call that insider media relations.
And consequently, it's the second pillar in brand protection PR. And we're always trying to go out of our way to help our listeners build upon that pillar, because it's so important. We're always talking about the importance of relationships with reporters such as yourself, and establishing those relationships with the press. Do you have any examples of a company that maybe reached out to you and tried to give you that a little bit of a back and forth, and maybe not necessarily soft pitched you on something, but said, hey, this is who I am. This is, what we do. This is the products that we make. Just want to reach out and say hello. We're happy to be an industry resource should you ever call.
That's a great question for me, because I managed op-eds for Ganjapreneur. So I often turned relationships with experts I was interviewing into thought leadership relationships. And one very specific positive experience that I had was with the People's Ecosystem. They're a multi-state operator run by Christine De La Rosa. She's kind of a powerhouse in cannabis. And what we did is monthly, a new female executive from their firm would write something, and I worked directly with their reps to find out what they actually wanted to talk about. And then from there, we built out a pitch and a title. In a less organic way, I developed a relationship with a gentleman named Dan Serrard, who's a marketing expert in cannabis. And his rep would just email me a pitch and say, would you like to read it? And so it can really be at either end of the spectrum. I loved those organic relationships where I just noticed somebody had some great points in a random conversation and said, are you interested in writing? Which can go either way. Some people, it's not their talent and you move on. But the People's Ecosystem was one of my favorites because Christine, you should go back and look up some of her op-eds for Ganjapreneur. They're very poignant and they pack so much experience as a social equity operator into 1,000 words, which is just not easy to do.
No, not at all. You're building trust with those contacts.
Exactly. And that's the basis of these relationships, because a reader is not going to trust something that doesn't have that sort of meat, a vegetarian, that
Right.
sort of meat on it. A reader is going to trust somebody speaking from experience, speaking from their innate knowledge. So that's what I try to do when I'm sourcing these.
That makes sense. And so then becomes the question, which journalists, right? I mean, if we went online and we searched CBD or cannabis or something, there's so many media outlets. What steps do you take to choose the journalists? And what steps should a business owner, if they have, say, be a CBD business, what journalists should they be targeting? What would your suggestion be?
That really depends on the product and the story, doesn't it? So I think it's best to start with yourself. Look in the mirror, identify who your consumer is, identify what your product is, and who you really would like to talk to about it. And then from there, you can find the outlet that they're reading, your perfect consumer. I love Marijuana Moment. If you're looking to target like heavy business people, policy interested, or the new consumer who wants hard news, I think that they're reading Marijuana Moment personally. I'm always going to shout out Ganjapreneur as well. But I also recommend searching your journalists on social media. You would be surprised how many are sharing a lot and how that can help you decide if they're the right person to tell your story or not.
I think we already know the answer to this question, but which social media outlets should business owners be using to seek some of the folks they want to make and establish relationships with?
I come from a B2B world, so I will preface that. LinkedIn is just popping off for cannabis and CBD. We are out there on LinkedIn, and I think it's because, and this has changed a little recently, but far less censorship of cannabis business who are operating within guidelines. They just simply sell CBD, are not being censored as much on LinkedIn. And the community there is growing in such a way that, wow, people's posts are just going very viral. I also recommend Instagram because I am just a millennial who loves using Instagram. And the kids love TikTok, but the thing about the talk is that you have to be artful. That the users of TikTok are very discerning. Direct marketing, they see it and they say, okay, scroll by. But the things that are going really viral, for example, this is a complete left off of CBD, but I got on the library thread of Instagram Reels, and some of these librarians are so funny and so accurately depicting what they offer and what they need from their patrons to keep going. So I guess the answer to TikTok would be hire someone young to help, but they seem to get it. But I think that LinkedIn for any CBD or cannabis executive is a great place to build rapport within the industry and build a network. And that word of mouth from in-industry people, we all have 4 aunties asking us what balm goes best for their tennis elbow, or my mom personally sends me her friends' ailments constantly and asks me which products they need. So in industry, word of mouth is just a prolific way to spread the word, and LinkedIn is where that's happening.
That's fascinating insight, and I'm sure our listeners right now are probably opening up a new tab on their window and going to LinkedIn to do some of that research and maybe make connections they've been trying to establish for quite some time. your recent story that you did in Ganjapreneur, it was on a company called Unlocked Tech. And it's very technical, the process that they use to service their cannabis industry clients. But you wrote it in such a way that, even a person who may not necessarily have a deep background in cannabis and how extraction processes work, they would be able to understand that. And you used a really great analogy to talk about that. So when you're writing a story, and I guess this is kind of a two-part question. Number one, do you look for companies to try to give you an analogy to make something like a really technical process easier? Or is that something that you have to do as a journalist to say, okay, how can I best connect with my readers or my viewers if it's going to be a digital type of news story?
The company is Day 3 Labs. I'll start there. The technology is Unlocked Tech.
Ah, gotcha.
And
yes.
The answer would be, it depends. Josh Rubin, the CEO, I'm thinking you might be talking about the Raisin Bran analogy.
Yep, that's the one.
And as soon as he said it, because my first interview was just speculatory for this story. I got a pitch from a PR rep from a company that was using this technology, just saying, hey, we have this gummy. And honestly, we get pitched on gummies 45 times a day. So I said, I know this PR rep. This company's been around forever. It's Oleo, Dab Oleo. So let's just have a meeting. So I met with their brand manager for 15 minutes. I did not really understand what was happening with this technology, but they were claiming that it was something important. And about 4 years ago, a company came out and said they were making CBD from hops, and it turned out to be, I think, pretty false. And so I said, okay, let's just give this the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to meet with the CEO of Day 3 Labs. So I sought them out. I found out his rep and I got through to him, and he was able to explain the technology to me as a former biochemist turned CEO for a really cool company that takes advantage of the research abilities in Israel and then advantage of the enterprise in the States, because you can't sell cannabis this way in Israel and you can't study cannabis this way in the States. So I thought, one, that's very cool. They're going to be doing some really cool stuff studying Parkinson's with this technology soon. So I'm going to have to keep that relationship alive so I can learn. But yeah, he said the Raisin Bran thing, and something in my brain clicked. And the way that I write is to help people understand cannabis. I have been having too many Thanksgiving dinners trying to explain things to people that I said, I'll just put it on a link so I can send you that instead. And I knew that had to make it in the article. And I was very glad. I always approve stuff like this through multiple channels with the brand to make sure, one, I'm right about the technology, and two, I'm using the verbiage that they would like to proliferate in the world. And they didn't want to remove that Raisin Bran analogy. And it really is good. Pack the sugars right onto that little raisin and send those cannabinoids and terpenes into your bloodstream. But yeah, that technology was not easy to write about. I started writing like journalistically in this industry for a science magazine. And I was really BSing. I'm not going to lie to you about it. I was trying my hardest, but I do feel like that Unlocked Tech spotlight came full circle and really showed me, if you keep on working and keep on researching and learning from those hard lessons where you maybe made a mistake and reported something wrong and have to eat crow a little bit, you can become so much better if you just keep writing. That's what I tell everyone who asks me how I got here. I say, you just keep on writing. You've got this.
Yeah, got to do it, right?
Yeah, but thank you. I loved writing that one. I was pretty proud of it.
Well, it was your perseverance too, because it sounded like, from the initial onset of the email to contact you, you're like, well, I know these people, so I'm going to hear them out. And then you kind of stumbled onto something, even cooler eventually leading to that piece. I think that's fantastic.
And shocking, no one's talked about it yet, because I think that it premiered 4 or 5 months ago. And it's a game-changing technology. To be able to deliver the experience of smoking through an edible that's the same every single time, oh my goodness, that patients will be able to actually trust something ingestible that doesn't make you, THC will go through the liver and become, I believe, 11-hydroxy. Please look that up. But, and that's what makes you lethargic. And that's what makes the experience different when you're eating an edible. So this technology bypasses the liver completely. I believe they call it first pass metabolism. So yeah, the first pharmacological research that's really been applied to cannabis business is game-changing. Surprise.
Yeah, well, it was very technical, but again, congrats on making that that light bulb moment when people would go, "Oh, I see what this can do," and it's big stuff. So,
and
nice.
sometimes you do have to make an analogy, and that's when it's great to have a good editor, because those can get flowery, and you need someone to have the guts to be like, maybe cut a few words out of there.
It's creative, but it's not producing anything. Yeah. All right. Well, one of the other pillars here at MNC Communications is creating a resilient brand. So what does that mean exactly? Well, CBD business owners, they're always looking for, on the lookout for ways to strengthen their businesses and weather those threats to their reputation, their bottom line as well. So we help clients find the opportunity in all those challenges to, polish their reputations, prepare for the unexpected, as it's probably going to come. And that's really building a resilient CBD brand.
And that leads us into our favorite parts of these podcast interviews, because we get to pick your brain about, what's coming down the line. And that's the easiest way to prepare us to try and forecast, okay, what issues or what policy changes are going to impact my business. So as a journalist, you're always looking for the next story. We know that. So I'm curious, what are you looking forward to in 2023 when it comes to cannabis? Is it research? Is it technology? Is it policy changes? It just seems like we're headed kind of full steam towards something really, really big in this industry next year. And we'd love to hear your thoughts.
There's so much. You bulleted through those, and my brain was like this whirlwind of ideas. So I speak mostly to, I would just love to see small business owners survive what's coming. So that's generally what I look for and what I like to report on. Things like interstate commerce for THC inclusive plants and products could change the game for small businesses who are barely surviving. But I think the big elephant in the industry is that we're cusping on legalization, which for a lot of people is so exciting. And for a lot of us who have been doing this for a decade, a little scary, or much longer, the OGs and the Humboldt, because that brings the entrance of what I call the business boys, the big dogs, the people who have been waiting it out and waiting for federal oversight, who have a lot of experience in big business, in policy inclusive business, that may, hopefully not, wood knocking, may take out a lot of small businesses. So I think we're looking towards, and it's been a year of this already, a lot of mergers and acquisitions, a lot of consolidation. Also, on the positive note, I think a lot of small businesses are going to look for like a co-op type of formation where they can work together, providing products to stores, marketing, pooling resources so that they can survive alongside large industries. Because if we look at alcohol, beer, for example, you've got your Coors Light, and then in where I live in Bellingham, you've got like 45 small breweries. So there's space for both. It can get a little ugly as we fight our way to the next stage. So while a lot of people are really excited for legalization, I get nervous, I get a little white knuckled, and I'm looking forward to decriminalization, where we can stop persecuting people for small possession. We can release cannabis prisoners. We can research the plant. The great minds in our country can finally research this plant without fearing they lose all of their accreditation and whatnot. So decrim is what I hope for. Legalization is what everyone is pushing for. And I think that's what will come. And I just hope everybody keeps voting with their dollar and knowing where they're buying their CBD and cannabis products from, because that'll keep the small enterprise alive.
Well, with such a crowded arena out there in this industry, are there ways that a business owner can position themselves as one of those thought leaders right now in order to be the people that journalists think about interviewing when those stories come along?
And just to piggyback off of Mitch's question, I'm thinking of the small business owners that you just referenced in this, because what better way to get your name out there than to be published in the press, right?
Yeah. And one thing that I did differently is that I was gifted the ability to spend a lot of time seeking out people that are too busy working their tails off to stay in business, to have PR reps and reach out to me directly. So if you're a journalist, do the extra work. You're going to find some gems out there that just simply don't have the time to put their neck out and get discovered. But hiring a good PR firm that knows how to actually build relationships with a journalist rather than bombard them with constant press releases that are clearly mass sent. Mass sending is fine, but I mean, take a balance. Desk sides are the best way that I got to know journalists, or got to know reps, and that really did impact who I talked to. But also just write something. I met a lot of people who reached out to me with a story, or a rep reached out and said, this is already written. If you would like to read it and see if it fits your publication, please do. And that takes so much work. If a journalist doesn't have to do as much thinking, there's more chance they're just going to read it and see. So if you're not getting the answers that you want and you're not being able to be featured in the way that you want, think hard about what you want to talk about, write something good, and just send it out and see what happens. And seek out people like this who are interviewing people in the industry, because that gets noticed as well. And in cannabis, you tend to get continued to be asked onto things. If you're seen in one thing, it plants a little seed, and then it keeps growing with each interview. So reach out, don't be scared, make friends, don't hard sell and copy paste, but just be genuine. And that will get you into the right avenues, because the people that receive you are the people that are meant to. So.
I believe that too. And in 2022, networking and social media and making those connections is not weird. It's how business is done now.
Yeah.
All right. We've got one more question, Cara, and then we will get you off of the hot seat and on your way to enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And I think this is a difficult one for a lot of business owners to kind of process, because with a lot of the positive things happening in the cannabis industry, you're also going to have the other side of the coin where there's negative things happening too. And reporters such as yourself they need sources to talk about things. And sometimes it's not great, and it can be a bad look for a potential business owner to associate their brand or their business with a negative story. So how would you encourage a business owner to be a source for a story that's not great for the industry, and encourage them to say, listen, we want your expertise, and this is not going to have an impact on the good things that you are doing? I'm just curious, how do you go about that process? It's got to be a pain in the neck.
How to be a source commenting on a negative story, maintaining your own, I don't know.
I guess without drawing your business into that,
without being catty.
Yeah.
I think that speaking to what you know, not speaking ill of others, and following your gut about whether it's positive or negative is your best bet. Give it a day. Write a quote, because I'm guessing this might be a written in source quote, or if it's right on the cuff or right on the spot on the phone, speak from the heart rather than what you think will be funny or witty. I'm only speaking from personal experience because I've never been in that hot seat, but I often make the wrong choice in what I say when I'm trying to be something rather than just be. So And don't hard sell your business. I hate that as a journalist. If you add in something that's unnecessary just to write the name, we're going to link you. You know what I mean? It's going to happen. Don't worry. But yeah, don't try to be something. Just state the facts, period.
Yeah. Be real.
Yeah. It's this upcoming generation does not do well with the flowery BS. They just want to know what's going on, and they want to know who you are, and they'll make their own decision. So
yeah, that's good advice. Well, Cara Wietstock, thank you so much for joining us on this Move the Stairs podcast. We appreciate your time. If our listeners out there would like to reach out to you, what's the best way to connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You search my name, Cara Wietstock. Direct messages are open, and then it's not very business oriented, but my Instagram is Cara_Juana, like marijuana. And you can always connect with me there, but you're just going to get a lot of baby pictures and pictures of dogs.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Cara,
you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Cara.
Thank you. We appreciate your time. Thank you. That was a good conversation.
Yeah.
She was very knowledgeable. Obviously is very passionate about this business, and it really kind of shows how brand protection PR can work in everyday business. When we were talking early on at the beginning there, Jordan, about building customer loyalty, I jotted this down. She said, there's so many products out there that are similar. Don't be bashful. Tell your story. And that was great. I think it was great advice, because as a business, you might be thinking, well, that's kind of inside baseball. But if you're sharing what your motivation is, how you came up with your products, and why this is important to you, I think that will really resonate with customers.
Yeah, and speaking of customers, everybody knows you have your customer persona, right? Who's the person you want to sell your products to. What I thought was really cool when she was talking about, building relationships with members of the media, is really identifying, who are the readers of industry cannabis media. Are they your customers? If they are your customers and they fit that persona, those are the reporters and those are the media outlets that you really want to be making relationships with, so that your potential customers, or maybe even your current customers, are seeing your name published when talking about really important things. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I also picked up, obviously, when she she talked about, pick a PR firm that knows how to build those relationships with the media players out there, because there's so many. And then I think it sounds so simplistic, but just be real, be honest, and don't pontificate about things you may not know about. And I think that'll go a long way to building that resilient CBD brand.
I thought you were going to go for a shameless plug there for for our agency, Mitch.
No, well, we would always tell, have a PR firm. It helps you. And then I think she validated that, in that
absolutely
we do build relationships with those media outlets, so that can be a great help.
I totally agree, 100%. I was like, I wanted to say something when she's saying it. I was like, yes, this is what we love to do. We love to make connections and chat with people. But I got to say, this was a great podcast record. We need to thank our special guest again, Cara Wietstock, for joining us on this all new episode of the Move the Stairs podcast. We thank you, our listeners, for tuning in, and we hope that you'll join us once again for our next all new episode of the Move the Stairs podcast. And we'll see you then.